Hey, friends. There are moments in the Bible that are so unusual. If you really picture them in your head, you almost have to smile. One of my favorites happens in Matthew 17. Peter comes into the house, and before he even gets a chance to explain the situation, Jesus already knows what he's thinking about. Apparently, somebody has asked Peter whether Jesus pays the temple tax. Peter answers yes. Then Jesus gives Peter instructions that sound nothing like the kind of financial advice you would expect. He basically tells him, go fishing, catch the first fish, open its mouth. There will be a coin inside. Use that coin to pay the tax for the both of us. Now, imagine being Peter. Peter has already seen Jesus do incredible things, perform miracles, and so on. He had seen storms stop. He had seen sick people healed. He had watched thousands of people eat from a tiny amount of food. Still, there had to be a moment when Peter thought, you want me to look where? Most of us check the couch cushions when we need extra money. Jesus sent Peter to check a fish. And that strange little story contains one of my favorite lessons about following Jesus Christ. God does not always provide in the way that you would expect. Sometimes he provides through something already familiar to you. Now, Peter was a fisherman. Jesus did not tell Peter to become an accountant. He did not tell him to start a new company by Friday. He did not hand Peter a 30-page financial strategy. He told a fisherman to fish. Now, there's something comforting about that. I love it. Sometimes when we're worried about the future, we assume the answer must be complicated. We think we need some enormous breakthrough. We need the perfect opportunity. We need somebody important to discover us. We need a dramatic change. Meanwhile, God may already be working through something sitting right in front of us. That happens to me all the time. Look back over your past. How many times were you looking outside of your current circumstance and it was already in front of your face? You know, God will work through us. Maybe it's a skill we already have, a relationship we've already built, an opportunity we've overlooked, a door we assumed was too ordinary. Peter probably woke up that morning thinking fishing was just fishing. He had no idea one fish was about to carry his entire tax payment. That is worth remembering. I want you to think about this. You do not always know what God has placed inside the ordinary parts of our lives. Maybe you're sitting at work right now wondering why you are still here. Maybe you have been doing the same job for years. Maybe you're taking care of children and wondering whether anything important is happening. Maybe you're helping an aging parent. Maybe you're building something slowly while watching other people seem to move much faster. It's easy to assume God only works through dramatic moments. But well, Jesus constantly used ordinary things: bread, water, fishing nets, seeds, boats, coins, lunch, mud. Jesus could turn the most normal object in somebody's day into part of a lesson they would remember forever. I imagine Peter walking toward the water after Jesus gave him those instructions. He probably took his fishing equipment with him, but I wonder what was going through his mind. What if I catch the wrong fish? What if there is no coin? What if I open the fish's mouth and the fish is just as confused as I am? Peter still had to cast the line. Now that matters. Think about that. Jesus promised provision, but Peter still had to take action. He had to walk to the water. He had to throw the line. He had to wait. He had to pull the fish in. Then he had to do something most fishermen probably do not normally do: check the mouth for money. You know, faith often works like that, though, doesn't it? I just love the way God works. We pray for God to open a door, but sometimes we still have to walk down the hallway. We pray for employment, but we still have to send the application. We pray for healing in a relationship, but we may still need to make the phone call. We pray for direction, but eventually we have to take a step. Peter could have sat in the house and said, "Jesus, I completely believe there's a coin in that fish." Wonderful. But the tax would still not have been paid. At some point, Peter had to go fishing. That's, another part of the story that I love, because Jesus provided enough for the both of them. Not just Peter, not just Jesus, both. The exact need was covered. And you know what? Sometimes we become so worried about tomorrow that we forget how many times God has already carried us through yesterday. Think about some of the things you once worried would destroy you. You know what? You're still here. You have probably survived days you thought you could never handle alone. You've made it through disappointments you never wanted. You've lost things. You've rebuilt things. You've cried. You've started again. And somehow, here you are. You reached today. That does not mean that every problem disappears, does it? Jesus never promised a life without difficulty. Peter eventually faced challenges far greater than that tax bill. But this strange moment with the fish gave Peter another reminder. Jesus knew what Peter needed before Peter even explained the problem. Now, that might be the most comforting part of the entire story for me, because remember how it begins. Peter walks into the house. Jesus speaks first. Peter had not yet explained everything. Jesus already knew. And if you're carrying something tonight that you have barely been able to put into words, I want you to remember that. Jesus does not need a perfect explanation. You do not have to organize your thoughts before you pray. You do not need a presentation. You don't need bullet points, and you don't need to begin with, "Lord, as discussed in our previous meeting." He already knows. Tell him anyway. Prayer is not about giving God information that he missed. Prayer is about bringing your heart into the conversation. Maybe the answer will come the way you expect. Maybe it won't. Peter probably expected the tax payment to come from a pocket. Jesus put it in a fish. That's the humor and the hope of this story. God is not limited to the solution you have already imagined. The answer can come from somewhere you never thought to look. The opportunity can come through somebody you never expected to meet. The next chapter, well, that can begin in a place that you thought was ordinary. And sometimes the thing God asks you to do next may seem ridiculously simple. Hey, Doug, why don't you buy a camera on Amazon and start a YouTube channel? Friends, cast the line, make the call, send the application, write the page, apologize, try again, show up tomorrow. You may not see the coin yet. You see, Peter did not see it when he started walking toward the water either. He simply trusted Jesus enough to cast the line. And somewhere beneath the surface, there was already a fish swimming around with an answer in its mouth. So if you're worried tonight, my friend, I want you to remember Peter. Remember the fishing line. Remember the fish. Remember the coin. And most importantly, remember Jesus. He knew the need before Peter explained it. He knew where the provision was before Peter could see it. And he knew exactly what Peter needed to do next. Maybe you do not need to understand the whole plan today. Maybe you just need enough faith to cast the next line. And who knows? Your answer might already be swimming toward you. I love that story. Friends, my name is Douglas Vandergraph, and I believe in Jesus Christ. God bless every single one of you. Every single one, including everyone you love.